again, and welcome to the third part of this episode of Let's Make Animation. So where we left off, we created a run cycle, and I showed you how we approach the camera pull back. We also discussed some tips for anticipating new objects that you want to introduce into your storyboard by introducing it one storyboard frame earlier than the character actually interacts with it. And you're going to see me do that again in just a few minutes. So we're just following the same techniques again, extending our background, creating new layers, and drawing the action. You see, I also drew a kind of like an action line where I want the action to go. That's very helpful if it's a particular direction especially if you want to do a direction change. That's very helpful. In this case, she's jumping off to the right. And don't be afraid to draw the character and realize that the size is wrong. Just use the transform and just scale it. We're still using the same shading colors from the beginning. We haven't changed the character's shading, and in a moment that's going to become a problem because the foreground and background shading changes because we're pulling back and we constantly need to just shrink down the background and create new elements. And those new elements have different shading, and now our character is slowly going to become lighter than it originally was. You can see from the first frame to this frame, it almost looks like it's a smoggy daytime already, when it's actually supposed to be night. Doing some set extensions. I think this is going to be the last set extension that I'm going to do. From here on, I'm changing the action so that we don't constantly have to go back and keep adding to our background. From here on, we can just use one element. My idea was to put a flag in there, and then I realized, well, if the character is going in that direction, that flag is going to be in the way because she's going to be behind it, and we always want to see our characters, so take out the flag. And again, you'll see in the right side, it looks really messy. And we don't mind that. As long as we can read what it is, then it's fine. Also, in the previous parts, I was talking about using blur to overcome some of that shading issues. And if you look there in the background, I've blurred out all of that initial set that we had. And everything in the foreground now is a lot sharper. There I'm blurring it again on a new layer and just putting on a mask. I'm just painting all the blur in and leaving out the foreground and merging everything together. I've become so comfortable with the character now that I can really quickly gesture uh, the type of motion that I want and quickly sketch that in. In the next episode, I'm going to spend a lot less time doing backgrounds and shading and all of the things that slow us down, and spend a lot more time drawing our actions. For this first episode, I wanted to show the process of shading and creating the backgrounds and everything. But I think once you understand that it's actually such an easy process, it takes a lot of time to do, but it's very easy. We can quickly go in and just sketch out all of the action just to get the sequence going. I'm looking at this character. I'm really excited to model this character. I think once it's rigged and we get to animate it in 3D, I think it's going to be a very fun character to animate. That's also some of the information that storyboards give you, is in terms of rigging. We need to look at type of controls that we need to build into the character in order to accomplish all of these motions. Like I said last time about breaking joints, I think it'll be a very good idea to build in controls for bending joints from the beginning. Again, using the transform tool just to extend the set quickly. And now I'm using the lasso tool just to cut out that piece in the foreground. Foreground pieces move a lot faster than background pieces, so I'm just moving that a little bit faster than I move the background. Just cleaning that up. The backgrounds is really frustrating to do because it takes such a long time and you really don't progress in the sequence. But once everything is done and it's shaded and it looks nice and you get to step through the layer comps, it's very satisfying to see the story progress. I hate that, if you notice that little dark black line that appeared there, it's very annoying. It's a glitch that happens with the Wacom tablets. It's whenever the computer reads or processes something, there's a slight glitch and it doesn't pick up the pen pressure. So that often happens. You can see here, even though the background is the opacity is turned down, you can already see that the character is much lighter than we started out with, even though we color picked from frame 1. It's because the foreground keeps changing and keeps getting darker and darker. We're gonna have to fix that at some point. So here I'm starting to introduce some shadows, just so that it's not such a jarring transition from light to dark. But I think in the future we're going to stick to the darker shades. Now we can step through and see if the action is reading. This is sped up, so might have a bit of a hard time following the motions. And the same process again, moving the background, scaling it, extending the set. I was a little lazy and I didn't want to use the lasso tool, so I just made a mask and just painted the foreground element in. But some things overlap, so I'll need to take that out again. There's a pro and a con to everything. Shrinking the character because the camera is still pulling back. And it's actually a nice technique for showing the direction of motion, is to use a limb, like in this example with the leg, extending it in the direction that the character wants to go. So when you see this frame, you know instantly where this character is heading. So you can spend less frames describing that motion. Sometimes motion blur destroys so much of the image, excuse me, and you really want some aspects of the image to stay sharp and only blur, for instance, the legs and the arms. In that case, radial blur might serve you better. And this time I decided use the lasso tool. I'm just smudging all that white, just using the smudge tool and just smudging everything back. This was actually a kind of a happy accident where we get that edge at the building. Since it looks like it's in perspective, why not use it? And here I'm introducing a building on the left, one frame ahead of time before the character actually reaches it. If you notice me drawing hands, I really don't spend a lot of time drawing hands. At most, I draw a thumb and a forefinger. The rest is just a wedge. After all, it's just gesture drawings. I think in the previous two parts, we've covered so much information on doing storyboards, and storyboards are just it's just a repetitive task. It's literally just coming up with ideas and putting it down on paper or on the computer screen for that matter. There's really not much more to say about it. But every time you sit down and do storyboards, you find some new way to describe action or information in terms of the character or camera work or whatever. And storyboards can go into a lot of detail. You can even give lighting information. If lighting plays a part in the story, you can draw that in. It just takes more time, but you can draw that in. Here you can see I flipped the image and just placed her on the other building, and now I'm just drawing the in-between frame. Also saves a lot of time. If you can copy and paste and reuse things, why not? The faster you can get through this, the better. The shape of that head kind of reminds me of The Rocketeer. It was a 19-something movie. It's actually a brilliant design. It started out as a comic book. Only realized that now with this pose, because this is kind of like an iconic pose for all superhero characters. But we're motion blurring it so much that when that frame passes, all you're seeing is the direction of motion. Realize she's in the wrong position there. Moving up, yeah, that looks better. And this is much easier because we're just moving the whole canvas down. And I'm just adding the top of that building. And now we can just concentrate on the action that needs to take place. And just flipping the image. We can put in one more frame. So I'm getting quite near the end of this part, and I'm thinking I need to close down this episode and start with a new episode where we'll try to work a little bit faster. We're not as far into our storyboards as I had hoped, but in the next episode I'll be working a lot faster and spend less time drawing backgrounds so that we can get the sequence working. In that pose, all she needs is a cape. But again, we're completely going to destroy the image with motion blur. It's just a gesture of the direction of the motion. So if you have any ideas that you'd like to share, I'd love to try and incorporate those. As always, please like and subscribe. You'll be helping out my channel a lot. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.